Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Laura. Today I have my 10 cards 1 kit featuring the Heffy Doodle Wanna Build a Snowman card kit. To prep for these 10 cards, I took all of the cardstock and cut it in half and folded it in half either in a portrait or a horizontal orientation to create my cards, and I stamped a whole bunch of images and went ahead and die cut those. So for card 1, this was the very first card that popped into my head when I saw this stamp set. I knew that I wanted to make this straight away as soon as I saw all of these little snowman builder pieces. So we've got a couple different stamps. We've got a body and a head, then we've got some eyes, a little carrot nose, there's also a pipe if you want to use that as well, and a couple of stick arms. I wanted to keep this piece kind of simple because this will be an interactive card. There'll be some movement going on, so I wanted everything to just kind of be connected together. I didn't want to have too many tiny pieces kind of poking out of the die cuts. So I went ahead and stamped them all down, and then I'm just using some of my heavy tape to hold my dies in place as I run it through the die cut machine. You don't want to have your dies kind of move around inside your die cut machine because that has definitely happened to me and it's definitely frustrating. So I just hold them in place with a piece of tape, and this low tack Heffy tape is wonderful for that. So I'll go ahead and pop all the pieces out, and then I went ahead and got a card base, and I actually used the My Favourite Things Surf and Turf dies to create some movement channels. Hopefully that will make sense. So you can see them here. This die set also cuts some small circles, and then you have these like plastic spacers that you put in between them. And this is just what I'm putting together here. So I'll go ahead and lay them on the back side of my card panel, and then I'll attach a paper circle on the top, and that will kind of lock that in place. So it will be trapped in between those channels so it can kind of slide up and down and move around, but it shouldn't pop out of the card. Then on top of each of those circles, I'll place my images, and I'll be able to move around the different pieces that I've created so I can build my snowman on my card base. As I say, this was the first card that popped into my head when I saw the stamp set. I knew that I wanted to create this exact card. If I did it again, I would probably do one horizontal channel and then one vertical, one vertical channel and 2 horizontal rather than the 3 that I have here, because I think it was maybe a little bit too busy and unnecessary. Now, if you don't have this die set, no problem at all. You can create a very similar card just using a craft knife by cutting sections for these pieces to move around, and you can use a penny in place of the plastic razor that I've used. And if you search on YouTube for penny slider cards, you'll find many tutorials that explain how to do this. I would have gone into more detail, but with this being the 10 cards video, I didn't have the time to go into the detail on this, but you can definitely find some great tutorials out there. So I went ahead and added foam tape all over the back of this piece, and then I'll stick that down to my card panel. There was enough cardstock included in this kit for you to have your 10 card bases and also some card panels as well, and some paper that was perfect for stamping and Copic colouring. So here you can see me just moving those pieces around so you can build your snowman, and then you can kind of slide them out the way and send this card to your recipient with it all kind of messed up, and then they can figure out building him. I think it would be really fun to add some extra pieces to this if you wanted to make it a little bit more complex, and you could add in those extra elements like the arms, but I wanted to keep this kind of quick and simple for this video. So I use my MISTI to stamp the sentiment, "You want to build a snowman," and then I'm just using some multimedia mat to add some of the different sequin elements. There's a couple different things included in the sequin mix, and it's got these tiny little stars, and I just went ahead and covered the base to add some more interest in the background. So I couldn't resist playing with this just once more before I finish up this part of the video. I think this card would be brilliant to send to my nieces and my nephews. I think they'd love kind of working with this puzzle piece, and it kind of reminds me of those little slider puzzles that you'd get where you have to kind of move one piece out the way and then get the next piece in. I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and I'll definitely be making more of these. Okay, so for card 2, I'm using the distress ink that was included in the kit and this fabulous stencil. I really can't say enough good things about this stencil. I love how it has the edge pattern, and then in the center it also has the falling snow. And I'm using a combination of both of those pieces. Now my distress ink that I'm using is actually from my stash. I had this color in a larger distress ink pad, but you do get a mini included in the kit, and I'm using the finger dauber that was included in the kit also. So I did speed this part up, as you can tell, because it takes a little while to blend your distress ink, but once I had that all blended on the background, I'm using the snow portion of my stencil and that Nuvo Glimmer paste just to add some perfect shiny snow in the background. You want to make sure, that makes no sense. You want to make sure to clean everything really well after you've covered it with that glimmer paste, because once it dries, it will really be stuck on there. So that includes any kind of craft knife that you use to spread it through the stencil, and also the stencil itself. Here I've got my little penguin and I'm sticking him on one of the snowbanks using some foam dots, and also this sentiment. I really loved that the dies were included for a couple of the word stamps. I think it looks really nice to be able to add some foam behind them and raise them up off the background, or just to die cut them and glue them down flat and just have that really nice white border around your stamping. I added all of this to the dark blue cardstock. And that is this card finished. I wanted to have a nice, quick and easy card following on from that slightly more complex Build a Snowman card. Okay, so moving into card number 3. I've sped this section up because you can't really see what's going on here, but I'm repeat stamping the Christmas tree image all over the background of a blue card base, and I'm just using some Versamark ink to do this. It doesn't show up great on camera, but it does leave behind a watermark effect. I'm not using it for embossing this time, I'm just using it to leave that watermark image in the background, so there's kind of a subtle tone-on-tone background stamp there. Then I have a little cheese wedge, that's what I'm going to call it, of this cardstock here, or this patterned paper rather, and I'll stick that down flat to the card base and then add a die cut circle from the blue plaid. I'm just gluing all of this flat to this card base. It's a really nice, quick and easy assembly card, and that circle works perfectly to add this little Christmas tree on top. So I went ahead and coloured this Christmas tree. You will notice at some point I also added some glossy accents over the top of each of the baubles, so they had a nice raised appearance. Then I'll go ahead and use my MISTI to add my sentiment. And then I'm just cutting a small section in the side fold of this card. If this had been a top folding note card, I wouldn't needed to do this step, but I wanted to be able to add some twine through here, so I just cut a really small section, and then I'm using my scissors just to poke through some of that twine. And then I'll go ahead and tie that on a knot. I kind of fussed with this for a little while, and originally I was going to put my knot over on the left hand side, but then I decided to kind of swing everything across and tie that over on the right there. I had fallen instantly in love with this Christmas tree stamp, and I'm so pleased that as I post this video, everything is available for shipping. So if you have done a pre-order, all of your new release Heffy Doodle products are available for shipping, or if you haven't ordered yet, you can head over to the website. Okay, so for this next card, I just used the edge of that stencil just to trace the outline of these curves. You could definitely freehand this, but if you've got the stencil to hand, it's much easier to use it. And I went ahead and trimmed those so I'd have 3 different snowbanks, and I'm again just using my distress ink to add some blue to the edges of these pieces, so it'll kind of separate a bit easier from the card base and just kind of give it that frosty cold glow. So I'm going to be using a lot of foam tape for this card, hence why I've got this sped up so you don't have to watch me add foam tape for too long. And I'm working in layers. So my snowbank in the background is glued straight to the card. Then I have 1 layer of foam tape for the next one, and then 2 layers of foam tape for the third. Once I'm happy with those layers, I'll go ahead and trim off the excess and then add a little bit of shine using my Nuvo Glimmer paste just along the edges of each of those snowbanks directly over the distress ink. I'll set that to one side to dry, and then I'll come back in with my stencil and just sponge through using that distress ink to add some blue snow falling down. Next up I have a piece of the patterned paper that I've cut to be the same size as my card base, and I'm using a smaller stitched rectangle die just to cut away the centre so I've got a frame piece. And then I'll add some thin double-sided adhesive all the way around the outside edge of my frame on the back side, so that's the stripy side for this piece. And then I have a piece of acetate that's cut to be larger than that inside window, and I'll go ahead and press that down and make sure the edges are sealed really well because this will be a scene shaker card, so I want to make sure that nothing falls out the edges. So I went ahead and added double-sided sticky tape to the back of that frame, and I made sure to work in the same number of layers as I have on my card base. So up around the top section I had 1 layer of foam tape, then where it meets that first hill I had 2 layers, and then when it meets the third hill I had 3 layers, and that just makes sure that everything sits nice and flush around the outside edge. I'm just working away with a couple of my pre-stamped die cut and coloured images, and I'm just gluing those some flat to the card base and some with foam tape. And I love this little penguin here with the stick in his hand. It looks like he's just finishing off his snowman. Once I was happy with that scene in the background, I used some of the stamps to stamp my sentiment. And I just used my MISTI to make sure I could get perfect stamping. I'm using a new ink cube, and this one is really juicy, so I'm pressing very gently with this and double stamping so I don't kind of get those little blobs of ink that you can sometimes get with a new ink cube. I went ahead and had added a larger hat to this snowman, so he looked a little bit different from the one in the background, and then I'm sprinkling in a whole bunch of my sequin mix. I mentioned in my unboxing that there are some small beads in this sequin mix, and they do give a really satisfying shaker sound when you shake this all. So I went ahead and added down the frame, and I'm just pressing really firmly around the outside edges. We don't want any of those sequins to fall out the sides or any of those small balls to fall out the side either, so you just want to press down really firmly. So I gave this a good shake just to see how I liked it, and you can't help but play with a shaker card. It's just a fact of card making. Okay, on to the next card. For this one I'm working with one of the tags, and I'm using my Distress ink just on a laminated piece of cardstock for easy cleanup, and I'm sponging that down and then adding different amounts of water to get different depths of colour. And I'm drying in between each of my layers, and then I'm adding some of that colour onto a stamp block and flicking it onto the tag, and then just adding some water to get that oxidizing effect, or that distress reaction rather. Then I have my red card base, and I've got some more of that striped pattern paper, and I'm just going to stick down a section over on the side here. I really love these stripes. I think stripes and Christmas look really beautiful together, so I'm really pleased with this one. I really loved this pattern paper, and I think it looks really nice just as a highlight in the background on this tag piece. So I've got a Christmas tree here, and I've added the star stamp. And I'm going to go ahead and glue that down to my tag. I want to put my tag at an angle, but I'd like the Christmas tree to be standing upright, so I just made sure to place that before I added the glue. And then I'll just poke some holes into the star. This might seem like a strange thing to do, but here I'm working with some Chibitronics tape and some little LED sticker lights, and I'm going to make a card that lights up. Because this is a 10 cards 1 kit video, I'm not going into too much detail as to how I do this. This is certainly sped up, I don't work this quickly, and it doesn't really explain what I'm doing. I'm essentially laying down double-sided copper tape to create a circuit, adding an LED sticker, and then securing my battery in place. But if you do want some more information as to how you make one of these light up cards, I'll link to one in the description. And the Chibitronics are available over at Heffy Doodle also. So I added some twine to my tag, added some tape, and also a sentiment that I'd stamped and die cut. And then just to finish this one off, I'm going to bring in another Heffy Doodle stamp set. This is the Interactively Yours stamp set. And I'll stamp I'm an interactive card just in that bottom right hand section, so the recipient knows that this card does something other than looking adorable. And then I'll stamp press here just over the top of where the battery is, so they know just to press on that section of the card and they'll see that star light up on the Christmas tree. Okay, on to our next card. For this one I've just drawn a snowbank and I'm going to cover that in some of my glimmer paste, but this time I decided to mix that with my Distress Oxides just so I could tint the colour of this glimmer paste. I'm completely covering my snowbank, or my little slip and slide, with this paste, and I'm working with this till I've got a nice smooth layer, and then I'll set that off to one side to dry, and again just make sure to clean everything up before that glimmer paste sets. So while my glimmer paste is drying, I'll work on my card base. I have a pattern paper panel that I've cut to be slightly smaller than the card base, All of these cards, if I didn't mention already, are 4¼ by 5½, which is a standard A2 size, and that's the size that you achieve when you cut and fold the cardstock that's included in the kit in half. I'm just using my microfiber cloth to clean up any of that excess glue. Top tip for craft rooms, definitely have at least 5 or 6 microfiber cloths to hand at any given time, especially if you're making multiple cards, because things will get messy and they're perfect for any cleanup that you need to do. Here I've just got some foam foam and I've traced around my little slip and slide snowbank, and I'm going to use this to add some dimension so I can raise that piece up off my card base. I just added some glue and I'm kind of smoothing that out because I was pretty heavy-handed with the glue, and again my microfiber cloth will come in very handy to get that glue off of my fingers and off of my card base where I've made a mess. And I'll just lay that glimmer piece down. This is a really nice way to create a custom glittery cardstock. So once that glimmer paste is dry, the glitter or the kind of shine within that paste is non-transferable. And because it is a clear product, or a kind of, I think it's ever so slightly white, I haven't actually tried it against a black cardstock to check, but it tints really nicely just using your distress inks. So I've stuck this down to my card base, and then I had to use this little penguin that looks like he's sliding down a bank, and he just looks perfect. He was the inspiration for this card design, and I'm just adding some foam tape behind him and placing him on this little bank, and you can just imagine he would have a great time kind of sliding down into that dip and then kind of swooshing up off over to the right hand side. I went ahead and added my stamping. With hindsight, I probably should have white heat embossed this so it kind of popped off the background a little more, but hindsight's 2020. I went with black ink for that sentiment. Okay, so for this card, I've got you sped up quite a bit. I'll talk you through what I'm doing. I've gone ahead and stamped a bunch of my different images onto some full stick post-it tape. And then I lifted up kind of 4 or 5 sheets of that post-it tape and then fussy cut around each of my images, so I'd have a whole bunch of masks with only kind of one pass of a cut for each one. And then I'm just using a acrylic block and my stamps to stamp down a scene using all of these different penguins, and once I stamp one down I'll mask it off. And that will enable me to create a crowd of penguins and a couple different Christmas trees, and I also snuck in a snowman in there. It kind of reminds me of those, do you ever see those posts on Facebook where there's like a whole bunch of a certain thing and they're like try and find the orange, or there'll be a whole bunch of penguins and they'll say try and find the snowman. It kind of reminds me of that. So I peeled off all those masks and went ahead and did some colouring, and I think this little penguin party looks like so much fun. I love how this card turned out, and I think it was definitely worth all of that masking. And it actually wasn't too bad with the fussy cutting because I cut several masks at once, and you can certainly keep those attached to the back of your stamp set and use them over and over. As a kind of grounding piece, I added some striped cardstock, a very thin strip just underneath all of these penguins, and the colours that I'd used to colour everything in kind of matches with the colours that are in that stripe. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add this piece to some fun foam. You could use some like 3M foam tape or some foam dots if you have those, but I think it's really nice to use the fun foam. So then I went ahead and stuck this whole piece down to my card base. And that is this card finished. You'll notice that this piece is ever so slightly smaller than my card base, just to leave a small amount of that white border around the outside edge. Don't they just look like they're having so much fun? So onto the next card, I traced very lightly a triangle shape in the background, and then within that triangle I kind of added some wiggly lines to create my template for a string Christmas tree. There's a few different ways to achieve this look. You could poke some holes in your cardstock and kind of stitch the pieces through, but I just went with this way here, which was to lay down a template with a pencil and then go over that with some glue and then just gently press my string into that wet glue. I've also added a star using the star stamp at the top of this piece, and then I'll go ahead and add my sentiment also. I'm using a longer acrylic block so I can stamp both pieces in one pass, and then just inking that up with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. and pressing that down. And I really love this ink, it gives a perfect stamping of your sentiments. I added a little bit of colour to my star using a Spectrum Noir alcohol marker. And then I've gone ahead and I actually split the twine. So twine is made up of a whole bunch of different kind of thinner threads. So I pulled some of those apart so I had some thinner white thread, and I knotted a jingle bell onto a couple pieces, and then I glued those down onto my tree as if they were kind of baubles or decorations on the Christmas tree. And I just added those with some glue and then trimmed off any of the excess, and it gives a really nice kind of jingle sound as you shake this piece. Okay, on to card 9. This piece that I'm using here is the inside that we cut when we created that frame for the scene shaker card earlier on, and I'm using this piece because I couldn't let that pattern paper go to waste. It's just beautiful with all those stripes. So I'm sticking that down onto a red card base, and then I've cut a little snowbank. I believe I traced this using my stencil again because I am terrible at freehanding, so why not make life easier if you can? Then I used a whole bunch of my different scraps to die cut some banner shapes. If you don't have a banner die cut, no problem, you can always freehand these, but again, I like to make things easier for myself where possible, especially if I'm creating 10 cards at a time. So I used all of the different pieces here, and I kind of lay everything where I wanted it and added a little piece of washi tape along that top edge, so I knew exactly where to trim these pieces so they would be the right size so they fit onto that panel piece. I went ahead and added these. Some are flat to the card base, and then I added a couple with some foam dots, and I realised that I wanted just one more, so after I'd got these pieces stuck down I kind of felt like there was an empty space, so I just went and die cut one more piece and stuck that down also. Next I wanted to add my penguins, and I wanted these guys to be having a snowball fight, so to achieve this I hole punched some little snowballs, I guess, using my hole punch and some of that white cardstock, and then I'm sticking one in between the penguins as if the guy on the left has just thrown it to the guy on the right, and then I'm just creating a little pile of snowballs next to each of these penguins. I think a hole punch works perfectly in terms of size for creating snowballs for these guys, so I think that's a really nice, quick and easy way to be able to bring this together. And then on top of those snowballs I added a little bit more of the Glimmer paste to make them shine, and also to that snowball in the middle and along the edge of my snowbank. I'm adding my sentiment underneath the card here, and again just using the die cut sentiments. I really do like this idea of having the stamp and the die for such a small sentiment. I think it really kind of pops. You'll see here when I put this piece down onto the red card base and you get that separation with the white shadow around the stamping. It's a really nice effect. To complete this sentiment, I'm using the Walking in A stamp. So the entire sentiment will read Walking in a Winter Wonderland, and I'm just stamping that in that top left hand corner. Almost got my left and rights confused. And that is this card finished also. So moving into the last card, card number 10, I wanted to create another kind of snowball fight scene, and this time I'm using some of the images on the front of the card and some on the inside. So I've die cut a large and a small circle, so I've got this frame piece, and then I'm using my small circle die just to cut on the front of my card base. So I've got this window that will show through from the front into the inside. I'm using that frame piece and just sticking that round just to finish off the outside edge of this piece. And then I'll go ahead and add some tape to the back of my circle piece, and again just using my microfiber cloth to clean everything up. And I'll add some tape to that circle piece and stick that on the inside, making sure to line up the design so it's continuous from that frame piece to the inside piece. I just think it kind of brings everything together really nicely when the design continues in that way. And I'll just put that through the kind of gap that I've cut and press that down firmly so I've got that patterned panel on the inside. And then I've got this little snowman who looks like he's throwing something. I'll stick him on the outside. And this little guy who I used earlier on to slide down the snowbank, I'm actually using the snowman's head here, so it's a really, really large snowball that's been thrown at him, and that's why it's kind of knocked him over and he looks like he's lying down. So I'll actually place that on the inside of the card so the scene continues from the outside to the inside. And then I'm just going to finish off the front with this striped patterned paper. I felt like it was just missing something like just underneath that scene, and this striped pattern paper works perfectly just to add that little bit of interest at the bottom of the card here. For my sentiment, I decided to use some more of those die cut pieces and just stick those down flat to the inside of the card. So that sentiment, you can read it from the outside, but then it's still there when you open up the inside of this card, and there's certainly enough space underneath this piece to write your message. So we can see some of the colouring on this piece, but no problem. I just die cut another one of this image, and I'm actually going to stick this down upside down, making sure to trim off any of the excess that would hang over this die cut circle, and that will just cover up any of that ink that's kind of shown through from our colouring. You don't have to do this step, but I do think it's nice to kind of finish everything off with that step. And that is all 10 cards finished. Let's do a recap. First up, we had the interactive Wanna Build a Snowman card where all the pieces move around so you can build your snowman and then unassemble him and rebuild him again. Then we had this little penguin on the snowbanks with some glittery snow in the background. We had this repetitive stamped background and then the Christmas tree. Then we had another Christmas tree, but this time with the LED sticker from Chibitronics so it would light up on the tag. Then we've got this little guy sliding down his little slip and slide snowbank with that glitter cardstock that we made using the paste and some distress ink. Then we have the shaker scene here with those little beads inside, so you get that really cool shaker noise as you shake it up with the sequins and the beads. Then we've got all of this masking and stamping for my penguin party. And I forgot to include my string Christmas tree because the glue was still drying, so apologies, that's not in this end piece here. And finally, our little penguin on the inside of the card who's been bowled over by that giant snowball. So this is all 10 cards. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new to my channel, you can go ahead and click on the logo on screen right now to subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, be sure to tap the bell icon to be notified whenever I post so you never miss a video from me. On screen are a couple more videos I think you might enjoy. You can go ahead and click on those to be taken through to the next video. But that is all from me today. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.